Texas Lutheran University.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's event. My name is Debbie Cottrell, and I'm the Vice President for Academic Affairs here at TLU. We have a very exciting evening ahead of us, so I hope everyone is ready to listen to both sides of a lively political discussion and conversation tonight. Before we begin, I want to be sure to thank the Jesse S. and Jack Harold Upton Brown Cultural Enrichment Endowment Fund for making tonight's event possible. Each year, we are able here at TLU to bring well-known guest speakers and cultural events to our campus so that our students, faculty, and staff, as well as the surrounding community, can benefit and enjoy these events. We are certainly grateful to the Brown family for this support. Now, to get started, please help me welcome our moderator for this evening, Darren Dunn. Y'all act like you already know Darren, but I'll tell you, Darren is the general manager of the Seguin Daily News and KWED radio station, and he has graciously agreed tonight to moderate our discussion. And again, a warm welcome to Darren, and here we go.
Debbie, thank you, and thanks to all of you. Greetings. Good evening, everyone. I hope you're excited about being here tonight. We're certainly excited to have you. We have two terrific speakers who are here tonight. Van Jones is here to represent the progressives. S.E. Cupp is here to represent conservatives. Van Jones is a civil rights leader, former Obama White House advisor, and CNN political correspondent. He's a Yale-educated attorney and the founder and president of Dream Corps, an incubator platform and home for world-changing initiatives that empower the most vulnerable in our society. The Dream Corps' three programs include Cut 50, Yes We Code, and Green for All. They work to close prison doors and open doors for opportunity. Over the past 2 decades, Van has founded 4 thriving social enterprises, advancing solutions to some of America's toughest economic and environmental problems. In 2009, Van worked as the Green Jobs Advisor to the Obama White House. There, he helped to run the interagency process that oversaw $80 billion in green energy recovery spending. S.E. Cupp is a nationally syndicated columnist, author, and commentator. She is a CNN contributor, a columnist at the New York Daily News, and a features contributor for Glamour magazine. She has been published in the Washington Post, the Detroit Free Press, the American Spectator, Politico, the Daily Caller, Slate, Maxim, NASCAR.com, Sports Illustrated, Human Events, FoxNews.com, CNN.com, and elsewhere. She was a consultant on the HBO program The Newsroom. She has appeared on dozens of television shows and radio programs, including Real Time with Bill Maher, The View, Fox and Friends, Hannity, The Daily Show, Chris Matthews, Red Eye with Greg Gutfeld, and Morning Joe, among many others. S.E. is also a member of the advisory board for the Georgetown Institute of Politics and Public Service. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Van Jones and S.E. Cupp. Should we start with dragons?
You always lose me with dragons.
Welcome. We wanted to begin tonight by talking a little bit about the current state of the presidential race. We can cover a lot of territory with that, but I want to get your thoughts, S.E., on where we are now with this sort of historic race.
where we are now, I think somewhere between garbage and pollution. Look, as a conservative who worked personally and very hard on the 2012 Republican autopsy to address some of the deficiencies the conservatives were having when it came to winning national races. And having seen some of the success of that manifest on the ground with my own eyes, I'm just deeply disappointed to see what we ended up with, because we had a deep bench of a lot of great candidates that I would have been real proud to have supported and voted for. And instead, somehow, for a lot of reasons, we ended up with someone who I'm not going to vote for as a Republican, who I think doesn't really care much about the future of the Republican Party or the conservative movement. I don't think he could define conservatism. And I don't think is a very good standard bearer for us as a party. Now, obviously, enough people in the primary disagreed with me, but I will remind everyone at the outset of this talk that both of these people were elected by 10% of the electorate, which means 90% of the rest of the country either stayed home or voted for someone else. So I'm not alone in feeling as if I have no candidate to really rally behind. And I know plenty of Republicans who are going to hold their nose and vote for Donald Trump. I know some Republicans who are going to hold their nose and vote for Hillary Clinton. It's just a personal decision, but where I stand as a conservative is deeply troubled, deeply disappointed, and knowing that we're going to have a lot to clean up in the future.
I agree with you on Trump. This is a very, very tough. I can't imagine being your age, the younger people, and this being the first election that you get to vote in.
God.
I just want to say, it's not usually like this.
Yeah.
Okay? This is weird. Okay? I think, regardless of who you're for, there's Tuesday when everybody votes, and then there's Wednesday morning. And no matter what outcome you are cheering for or you get on Tuesday, Wednesday morning, you're still going to have a bunch of problems in the country. And that, to me, is the real heartbreak. I see three very different rebellions happening in the country. The Trump rebellion, the Sanders rebellion, the Black Lives Matter rebellion. When you have this many pockets of deep pain, frustration, outrage, and upset, it suggests that something has really gone wrong at a deeper level. We have bad conditions and bad candidates, and I think S.E. and I kind of both look at both of our parties with just some disappointment. I have no problem voting for Hillary Clinton at all, but what I do know is that a bunch of young Democrats do, and their hopes and expectations about what politics can be has not been helped by this campaign at all. And I think we'll have a long conversation tonight, but I think that fundamentally what we're looking at is a bipartisan failure at the very top of both parties over a long period of time that has left a whole generation either outraged or disgusted, and both parties have to take responsibility.
You guys I've seen you on TV many times and try to offer reasonable and thoughtful analysis of what's happening. You've both sort of indicated this is all new. This is not the norm. Are there times where you just go, we don't know. We don't know how to react to what we're seeing?
Yeah, there was one time, 2016, that was the time when, like the whole year, where
That one time.
that one time called the entire year of 2016, where, we were just talking backstage. I was like, hey, what do you think is going to happen in the debate? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to bring my popcorn. I have no idea. So yeah.
I never thought I would be a conservative commentator, conservative voter, having to talk about a candidate from my party who looks back at things like Operation Wetback with nostalgia. I just never thought, I mean, so many of these issues that have come up, so much of what he has said, and I'm not going to give Hillary a pass either. She is scandal-ridden. I find Hillary Clinton's contemptibility, not a lot of daylight between her and Donald Trump for me. I mean, they're bad in very different ways, but Hillary Clinton is one of the least transparent people on the planet. And so I mean, so much of this is kind of earth-shaking, new stuff that we have had to respond to, in some cases defend, in other cases completely disavow.
And S.E. and I, we're two people on television who we just don't reflexively defend or attack anybody. We really, both of us, try to look at the facts. So with Hillary Clinton, I will say, again, happy to vote for her, but on the email stuff, I worked in the White House. Had I done what she did, I would be in Guantanamo. No one would be able to find me because you can't do stuff like that. Okay, that's a big strike. The way that she then talks about it, where it's sort of fishtails all over the place, and like, to me, that's another big strike. So for me, I have no problem saying those are two big strikes. Now, I also look at Donald Trump, and I feel like he's somebody who strikes all the way out multiple times a day. So from my point of view, I do see more difference. But I do think that we've gotten to a point where politics is no longer partisan. It's almost tribal. Like, you just have to agree with the people in your party no matter what. And that strikes me as new. So that, you know, you just have to follow these people off whatever cliff they're going off, and I just refuse to do that.
We have a question and that was submitted by one of the students here. It's a video question. This one comes from Jakayla DeBera. She's a senior political science major.
In light of the recent murder of an unarmed black motorist, Terrence Crutcher, by police officials, what can be done by political party officials to ameliorate an unjust policing system?
Well, you know, I've been working on police accountability, police reform, criminal justice issues for 20 plus years, so longer than some of you guys have been alive. And this is a tough problem to solve. And one reason it's hard to solve is because we actually ask our police to do 1,000 things, and that it's just frankly not fair. Look, my dad was a cop in the military. My favorite uncle just retired from the Memphis City Police Force. I'm from a law enforcement family. So I have a particular view on this stuff. If you're going to disinvest in communities, if you're going to give people, schools that don't work and not a lot of help and hope, and then try to control that with police and with stop and frisk and all that sort of stuff, it's a recipe for disaster. And so sometimes we focus on the individual police officer, but I think sometimes, there's a lot more blame than that to go around in any city. That said, if you look at these problems from the point of view of an African American or a Latino young person growing up in these neighborhoods, there is a sense of being damned if you do, damned if you don't. There's a sense that if you look at, say, maybe just to be stereotypical, say a white guy from a fraternity who might get drunk and get belligerent and hoop and holler and maybe even yell at a cop or be non-compliant or be uppity, those kids don't usually get shot. But if you're an African American doing much less that's non-compliant, a big part of the country seems to be willing to excuse really horrific levels of violence against you. And so you're kind of squeezed sometimes between street violence on the one hand and police violence on the other hand, and it's very hard to run that razor blade between the two to a good life. And I think we have a responsibility to take a step back and figure out what is going on here so that we continue to see all these videos, There are, I mean, we could go through a bunch of boring policy proposals, but fundamentally, I don't want us for it to become the new normal, that you just see, every other week, another conflict over this. I don't think that it has to be this way. There is a pathway to respect from both sides. Some of it has to do with, if I was going to change one thing, and then I'll be quiet. If I was going to change one thing, I'd change this. If you are a police officer and you file a false police report, you should go to jail. That by itself would change the level of trust, because too often you see the police report says one thing, and then 3 days later the video comes out and it's completely different. Now, people say, well, listen, the community people out there, they said this and that and the other thing, and it turns out what they said wasn't true. Well, yeah, that happens, eyewitness testimony, et cetera. But when you have, like you had in Chicago, a guy walking down the middle of the street got shot, and the police report was wholly false, and 20 officers signed off on it, and then the video was completely different, all of the people at the community level now don't trust any of the cops, not just the cop that shot, but the cops that signed off on the report. So let's just try to get some integrity back into the system, and I think that would make a big difference.
That's it.
I'll just add, I agree with most of what Van said. I'll just add, I think in the media, there's this false binary premise, that you must either be with cops or with Black Lives Matter. And I just find that to be so lazy. Because I think you can support the idea, the need for criminal justice reform, and all of the problems that Van laid out, and think that it's pretty terrible to go out and shoot cops. You can support both of those things, and I think there are folks from the Black Lives Matter camp that don't want to have that nuance, and there are folks from the pro-cop camp that don't want to have that nuance, and they say you're either with us, and you can't defend anything else, or you're with them, and I just don't think that's very productive. You and I are problem solvers. We like to start with where we agree on something and then build out. And I just think that would be a helpful.
I'll say two things. One is, I think most of the Black Lives Matter people also don't want cop shots. So I don't want anybody to think.
Sure. But when there's a Black Lives Matter protest in Minnesota and they're saying kill the cops, fry 'em like bacon.
Yeah.
That's not helpful, and I don't think
agree.
that's representative.
Right,
but that's
exactly.
not helpful to getting people to want to listen.
I agree with that. And somebody's like who used to be a professional protester. I'm not joking. You almost always have some nut group at the back of your march saying dumb things that you don't know about until the news, and then you're like, how did that happen at my march? Yeah. So anyway, but the other thing is that just on the Black Lives Matter thing, there was a lot of these people who said, well, if you say Black Lives Matter, you're saying that white lives don't matter, or you're saying, I wish it had been Black Lives Matter too. If they had just said that from the beginning, we could solve a whole bunch of confusion, but they didn't, so then it's like, okay, if you say Black Lives Matter, then you're a racist, and you don't like white people, and all that sort of stuff. And then they came out with Blue Lives Matter. Well, wait a minute. Why are you saying Blue Lives Matter? Does that mean you think that firefighter lives don't matter? And you think that school teachers' lives don't matter? And the bus drivers' lives don't matter? He goes, no, we're saying we think that the cops are under... Well, then that's the point that the kids are making. So if you can say Blue Lives Matter and understand what that means, because you think the cops are under particular fire, you should be able to understand why the kids are saying Black Lives Matter. They think the kids are... No. So... that's part of the frustration, is if you try to look at it from just can we just be fair here? You wind up kind of in between these camps, and sometimes your Twitter feed looks like you are the worst person in the world because everybody's mad at you.
Both candidates have spent some time talking about the issue of race. Them weighing into some of the situations we've had of late, the shootings, Donald Trump talking about the current state of the African American community. Those discussions that they're bringing up, Is it helping? Is it hurting? Is it moving the needle one way or the other?
I think two of the least likely people on the planet to calm racial tensions are Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. They do not represent change. They're 100 years old. Hillary had trouble with Black Lives Matter in the beginning, kind of understanding what is this? Are we for this, against it? Where am I supposed to be on this? Donald Trump walks into a rally and identifies his African American. Literally speaks like he's out of the 50s, like To Kill a Mockingbird. I mean, they're just not convincing change agents on this, many other issues. And I think they're both very transactional. Mm-hmm. So the things that they talk about and the things that they care about are based on polling and not necessarily a deep-seated interest in making some of that change. Yeah. I also think because they're two of the most polarizing people on the planet, I'm not sure either of them are going to have the trust when he or she becomes president to really bring a lot of different voices in. And that's what you need. You need trust. People don't trust either of these guys.
The biggest blessing Hillary Clinton has is Donald Trump. Because...
And vice versa.
And vice versa. Because, and I was saying this before, everybody's getting mad at me. I said, listen, I've been black almost my whole life.
There was that one time.
Yeah, but except for that, YouTube Bono phase, I've been black my whole life, and I've met many black people, and I'm telling you, the Democrats don't have necessarily forever a 90% lock on the black vote. For Democrats to win the presidency right now, they have to have not half the black vote, not 60, not 70, not 80, not 90, but 92, 93, 94% of the black vote. And so I was saying, listen, if anybody with just like a functioning brainstem came along and said one kind thing to black people, they could probably get like 15% of the vote. And Trump's got 2%. So I'm like, look, I keep telling Democrats, just because Republicans are dumb, it doesn't make you smart. You've got a big problem here. And, they just don't get it. I just say one more thing about people really didn't understand why so many African Americans took such offense at this. Trump comes out, your schools suck, you don't have any jobs, everything in the black community is awful, what the hell do you have to lose? Vote for me. Now, that landed poorly with me. And it landed poorly with a lot of people because, first of all black people are not poor. Let's just be clear. And that's not the way to talk to people who are poor. Okay? What if Hillary Clinton had come out and said to white, poor, red state voters who voted Republican for year after year after year and generations after generations, and said to them, you're poor, you live in a trailer, just go down all the stereotypes of that, and then said, you vote for me. People would have said, well, if I were going to vote for you, I am now going to make sure I don't, because that's just not the way to talk to anybody. And so it's again, you have these two characters. I think, my big nightmare is the midterm. If Hillary does win the midterm, your friend Paul Ryan, if he decides to run, he might get 49 states, because it's not the case that Democrats that African Americans are satisfied with the Democratic Party or satisfied with any of these outcomes. It's just that we don't like to be talked to in that way.
You mentioned Paul Ryan. I think that's a good sort of segue to talk about the two-party system. Will he get 49 states? Could he emerge out of a primary? Given the current state, is the two-party system dying a slow death, particularly on the Republican side, where you've seen some mainstream Republicans pushed out?
A couple things. Paul Ryan is uniquely, preternaturally talented. I know him. It's not a euphemism that he's my friend. He's a friend. And he's gifted. And Democrats are right to be scared of him if they are, because he's very smart. He's very warm. He's very compassionate. He wants to solve problems. And he is certainly someone, as a conservative, I would want to support. I would want to empower. And that's who I see as the face of my party, not this guy, wearing the Republican Party like a rented tuxedo, which is going to end up crumpled in the corner with cigarette butt stains and fluids on it by the end of this, trust me. And we're going to be like, can we get this dry cleaned or what? So that's on Paul Ryan. Look, we Republicans, sort of the landscape here, have spent the past 8 years barking about the establishment, right? Ted Cruz gets elected from this state, does exactly what he promised he would do, by the way, do everything he could to overturn Obamacare. That's what he did, and he made a lot of enemies in the Republican Senate, made a lot of enemies on the Hill, among Democrats as well. But he spent the last however many years barking about the establishment, and everyone who wasn't him was establishment. Well, Donald Trump recognizes, okay, if you're saying that the establishment is here, I'm just going to go one step to the left of you. And now you're an establishment. And so in a minute, Ted Cruz is the establishment. And so is everyone else not named Donald Trump. This put the Republican Party in a bind. To be clear, there is nothing anti-establishment about Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a billionaire. Donald Trump has influential levers on Wall Street, the media, corporate America. Every establishment there is, he's in. But all he had to say was, no, Ted Cruz, because I'm not a politician, you're establishment, and so is everyone else. And so that's part of the reason we got here. Two-party system dying? I don't think so. If there were ever a year to have a influential, powerful, promising, convincing third-party person run, it would have been this year when we had 17 people running on the right, record high levels of distrust in our system of government. People decided either it's not doable, you can't win as a third-party candidate, or we kind of like the system the way it is. I mean, I would love to see someone emerge as a third-party candidate, but there's a reason Rand Paul ran as a Republican and not a Libertarian. It's real hard to get elected that way. So, look, we get what we deserve. And when the people demand for third-party candidates, that's what'll happen. And when people actually think that they can win elections on a third-party ticket, then that's what they'll do. But because they didn't this year, I'm pretty convinced there just isn't the appetite for it.
Yeah, I agree. And look, I used to be young, like you, and I turned 48 this year, and that's a scary number. I'm like more than twice as old as many of you. And I remember in 2000, we'd had 8 years of Bill Clinton, and if you were a young lefty in California, Bill Clinton was, like Nixon. Like, we don't like you, you sold out too much, and you helped Newt Gingrich too much. So we had Clinton fatigue, and Nader ran. And I lived in California. If you live in California, you can vote for Kermit the Frog. It is not going to affect anything as far as the outcome. If Hillary Clinton needs my vote in California to win, she's already lost 49 states. So you have to understand, like an electoral college system, California, you can really vote for, third party, ninth party, 28th party. The Democrats are likely to win California. So I actually cast my vote for Ralph Nader in California. The polls that, we're about to close, it was clear that Gord already won, so it's kind of my little protest vote. But if you're a Democrat, that whole moment hangs over you, because you think how many protest votes or just no votes put George Bush within striking range, and then the Supreme Court finally, call that photo finish. And then would you have gone into Iraq? Would you have gone into Afghanistan? Would you have, had the big deficits? Would you have all these things? And so I think that for a lot of people who are at my age, we tried that third party thing and it didn't work. And I think for a lot of Republicans who are a little bit older than I am, Clinton got in some ways, he never got 50%. You had Ross Perot in there and the Reform Party. So I think the Republicans have danced their dance with the third party thing. I think the Democrats have danced our dance with the third party thing. And I think in some ways we're kind of stuck with what we've got. So I think for me, where there may be some common ground is, can we reduce the role of money in some of this? Are there things that are constitutional that can, listen, our Congress people spend 70, 80% of their days just dialing for dollars. They're not listening to you, they're not passing bills, they're not talking to each other, they're just raising money. So I think you're going to have this. In some states you may want to vote for other stuff to keep it interesting, but I'm really trying to figure out, are there some common ground reforms to make both parties work better?
The next question is on campaign finance. It comes from Tamara Cotwin, who is a senior mathematics student here at TLU from San Marcos, Texas. How can campaign funding change so the focus of elections is on the issue and not how much money a candidate can raise, to your point?
I see. I'm prescient. Look that up. I already said my piece. Look, there are a lot of really cool reforms. One guy, and I forget his name, is Republican, has this thing called the STOP Act. And it basically takes what they have in Florida. In Florida, if you're in the state legislature, you cannot ask anyone for a campaign contribution directly. It's just, can't do it. And so he's saying they should make that rule for our Congress. So your aide can ask, your chief of staff can ask, a fundraiser can ask, but you can never go into a room and stick your hand out or spend 6 hours on the phone asking for money, with the idea being maybe you would do your job then and pass bills and talk to your colleagues, listen to your constituents. So I think there are a lot of cool ideas out there, but we got to get through this election first.
I think there are some issues with campaign finance reform, but I think one thing that could help would be term limits. When you're not worried about your next election, then your only job is to perform for your constituents. It's your only job. And when you do that, then you help get another Republican elected. But when you're constantly fighting for your next gig, for your next term, I'm not sure that you're really invested in the public service aspect of your job. As to why issues aren't front and center right now, I'm not sure that has a lot to do with campaign finance reform. We are not an issues-oriented electorate right now. That is evidenced by the kinds of conversations our candidates are having on a regular basis. We can say we're invested in X issue, Y issue, Z issue, but at the end of the day, plenty Republicans have abandoned their issues to support a guy who completely contradicts them, and vice versa. So look, like I said before, we get the government we deserve, and until we start demanding something new, we're going to be stuck with career politicians or wackos. You can pick which is which.
Both. Our next question, this is a video question. It comes from Sarah Neal. Sarah is a senior political science major from San Antonio.
So a lot of my friends don't vote, and the reason they say they don't is because they don't feel informed enough to make a good decision. So how informed is informed, and how should they get there?
How informed is informed?
Well, a couple of years ago, actually maybe like a decade ago, a guy named Thomas Frank wrote a book called What's the Matter with Kansas? He's a liberal, and he was making the argument that Republicans in square states would vote Democrat if only they knew better. Obviously, this was a very elitist argument to make, but it stuck with me in more ways than one. I don't like to presume that you're voting a certain way based on how informed you are, how smart you are. People vote for different reasons, lots of different reasons. And I won't poo-poo someone for voting on religious ground, on faith, or for voting because they're very well read and they've done all of their homework, or because there's that one single issue that brings them to the poll every time, and nothing else matters in their life besides that. I don't like to judge the reasons people vote. It's a very private, personal experience. Mm-hmm. What I will say about your generation is that the cliche adage about young voters, that they are idealistic and naive, is definitely true of some other young generations. It is not true of yours. You are clear-eyed, you are skeptical. This is because you grew up in perpetual war, you witnessed a housing collapse, a financial collapse, you witnessed government bureaucracies failing at solving the problems that your friends were solving with apps and shared economies, ideas that they were putting into motion. You guys are the opposite of naive. You have seen too much. And so if you are not investing in politics, it's not because you're dumb and lazy. It's because you're too smart to get mixed up with the likes of us in Washington, D.C. You don't see government as the solution. And it's not that you think government's bad. You just don't see it as the most direct route from A to B. I get it. My problem is we need y'all. We need millennials to run. And if you're looking at this election, it's garbage, and you're thinking, who roots for garbage? Who would want to get into politics with this? But that's why we need you. And so every millennial I meet, I try to tell them, Republicans have ignored you and Democrats have taken you for granted. Do not let that scare you off of politics. Because you're the largest generation in history, you're going to be running my life pretty soon, and all of our other lives. We need you more than ever.
That's a okay, that. However, since this is a red state, you don't have to vote if you don't want to. Just joking. I want everybody to vote. The thing about the voting booth is the voting booth is not the place where you can get everything you want. It is the place you can lose everything you've got. That's, I think, a sober view. You can wind up in a dumb war. You can wind up with your taxes going up. You can wind up with all kinds of bad things, going on. You can wind up with your tuition going up. You can't get everything you want by voting, but you can lose everything you've got by not voting. So I think that's really important. Yeah. But I also want to underscore a point that S.E. made. It's a point that drives me crazy about liberals. I'm a Southerner, grew up in a small town. Coastal liberal elites love that book by Thomas Frank. And it basically says, you were very polite, it basically says, these white guys in the middle of the country are just too stupid to vote for Democrats. They just vote against their own economic self-interest all the time because they get tricked into it based on either faith or race or whatever. Mostly, dog whistle racial politics. That's the argument of this book. And I hate this book. And I hate this book for one reason. I hate this book because the people who like this book drive me nuts. And I say to them all the time, do you want to talk about white people? who vote against their own economic self-interest? Rich liberals who vote for tax increases are white people who are voting against their own economic self-interest. But you don't think that you're stupid. You think that you're brilliant, and much more importantly, your values are more important than your money. You're more than your money. You care about all your values. Well, hold on a second. That white guy in Kansas or Indiana who's voting, who says, yeah, maybe one of these social programs might get cut. But I don't want the government to go and rob somebody else of their money and come over here and bribe me, undermine my parenting so that my ne'er-do-well children do dumb stuff and never get punished for it because the government's saving them. My values say independence for my children and for me is more important than whatever money the government can give me. Now listen, that's not a great strategy for dealing with China. Okay? But those are values. Those are values. And those red state voters are putting their values above their economic self-interest the same way that you are. So if you want to have an argument on the facts. The insults that come from the coastal elite, the NPR crowd, toward the middle of the country, to me are just as offensive as the insults that come from Trump to the black community or the Latino community. And the fact that people don't even know when they're insulting each other, that's what's got to stop. We got to listen a lot better.
Immigration is an issue that has gotten a lot of play, and we don't need to talk about whether or not he's going to build a wall, but I do think we should probably talk a little bit about both candidates put forward some policy discussion about immigration. Is this real? Are we really going to see some sort of comprehensive immigration reform? What does this mean in this election?
Well, before we came out here, we had dinner with a really thoughtful group of people, and we had this very discussion. And what I'll tell you is the dirty secret in Washington is that there are some things that are more valuable broken than fixed. Having a broken immigration system is politically profitable. Democrats run for election on this issue, and so do Republicans. They fundraise off this issue. There is very little interest in solving this because then that goes away. How do I know this? In addition to people like openly admitting it. Polling of undocumented immigrants shows their priority when it comes to immigration is to achieve legal status, get out of the shadows. Their priority is not citizenship. Why? Because many want to work here and one day return home. What is the one issue that Republicans and Democrats have decided to make a wedge, a hurdle? Citizenship. Well, if undocumented immigrants aren't making citizenship the wedge, and instead they want legal status, why aren't Republicans and Democrats, forget citizenship, let's start with legal status. Why? It's not profitable to solve this problem. Immigration isn't the only problem like this, but it's, I think, one of the most visible ones, and the one that both Republicans and Democrats are the most sort of naked about. So I don't see that. I'm not sure that changes with either Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump getting elected. I think Donald Trump would find out very quickly how little interest there is among Democrats and Republicans to actually solve a problem that in many ways could be solved if we just acknowledged the areas that we have some agreement on.
You know, the reason these problems are so hard to solve is because there are lots of things that are true that actually pile up on the interstate. So that's a part of it. The other part of it is maybe more charitably for the liberal side of this is the real fear of creating a second-class a set of second-class citizens, kind of a Jim Crow and brown face, that if you allow this legal status, you're not really citizens, but you're still, that bad things can flow from that. So there are people who just love getting the money that you get by calling the other person names, and there's a huge industry of that. She's describing that industry very well. There's a huge industry of just don't solve the problem, just name call about it and blame, blame about it. But there are, on both sides also some principles too. So the big challenge I think that your generation has is that the style of politics that you see on TV, that you see on Twitter, or you guys don't even do Twitter, that you see in social media, is just the opposite of what's going to be useful to you. The style of start where there's disagreement and then just fight, and build up a whole machinery around the disagreement and all your fundraisings around disagreement, all your friends around the disagreement. Go from partisan to tribal, so you literally just won't even support the other side even when they're right, just because. Like that's not going to work for you guys. So you guys actually have to do something, and you're starting to see signs of it, do something completely different, which is actually try to find the common ground first and try to build friendships because the other person doesn't naturally agree with you. And you have almost no examples of that. At least, me and S.E. are kind of a famous example of it, but you don't have a lot of examples of that. But what I would say is that if you want to solve any of these problems, like student debt or the tax code discriminating against young people or 1,000 other problems, you don't have enough people who think like you to do it. There are just not enough Republicans in the world to pass all the stuff they want to pass with no Democrats. And there are just not enough Democrats in the world to pass all the stuff we want to pass without Republicans. There are not enough white people, there are not enough black people, there are not enough Latinos, there are not enough Muppets, there are not enough Smurfs. There's not enough of anything to get it done on your own. And so developing the ability to listen to other folks and to reach across, like for instance, when I first came on the air with S.E. Cupp, I don't know anything about guns except my dad had them and I was scared of them. That was my entire relationship with guns. And so I was like, sure, whatever things the Democrats said about guns, I was for, not because I had thought about it at all, but because I'm a Democrat. So that's what Democrats do. So I didn't have to think at all. Then I meet her, and she's like, brilliant, and you can't really argue with her about these things because she knows more about it than you do. And so you just, pray for the commercial break, Please, God, But then it turns out that the gun-owning community feels, I didn't say is right, but emotionally feels under siege. And that their rights are at risk, and that their liberties are at risk, and that they are disrespected, and that they're stereotyped, and that people who don't know anything about them talk about them but don't talk to them. I'm like, that's how black people feel. Like, I understand. And suddenly I was able to say, wait, hold on a second, let me back all the way up. And so now my views about, this stuff is very different. I'm not, listen, if they want to have background check, whatever dumb thing, it's not going to make a difference, but fine, you can pass it. But I'm not going to be out there passionately trying to bash on people who see this very differently and whom you're pushing all these buttons culturally and emotionally that's inflaming the issue. And what you get for it's not really that much. You just get more inflamed gridlock. So I hope that you will take the time while you're students. If you're a strong, conservative student, make some friends who are not. You don't have to agree. Empathy, just the ability to understand, doesn't imply agreement. S.E. and I disagree, but we're surgical in our disagreements. We aren't waving big, chainsaws at each other. We're very surgical on our disagreements, and therefore we can be somewhat productive. That's what I think.
Totally.
We have another video that we want to share with the audience. This one is actually, you're both in. This is while you and S.E. may surgically disagree, this is you disagreeing with Jeffrey Lord. And it was one of those situations where a topic came up in a presidential campaign that I never thought I would hear discussed. It was the KKK, so give it a listen. Why are you so racially divisive?
You know, that was one of those really interesting moments. We had been on TV for a long time, S.E. and I, probably 4 or 5 hours by that point. It's pretty late. And S.E. actually, to her great credit, started it. And this is, it very rarely happens. Okay, so we're all friends here, right? So we could.
Trust Street.
Yeah, exactly. So, so we have these things in our ears when we're on TV, and these people called producers sometimes tell us, you know, like, not what to say, but just tell us, like, look, you have 5 more minutes, or shut up and let these other people talk, or whatever. So, right before that segment, the producers got in my ear and said, first of all, we're going to clear you, which means we're going to send you home, which after you've been on TV for hours, you're like, thank God. And second of all, the next segment is just for the Republicans to talk. So please don't say anything. So I was elated. Donald Trump had just won Super Tuesday. I had said as much as I could say. I was getting ready to go home. So I have 2 thoughts in my mind: Uber and pizza. Like literally, I have my phone out, it's in my lap. I'm literally trying to figure out how I'm gonna get the hell out of here and get some pizza. And Jeffrey Lord said some nonsense, I don't know what it was. And then S.E. responded. And then what happened? Do you remember what you said? You said something about otherizing.
Otherizing, yeah.
Otherizing.
Yeah, that Donald Trump had spent a lot of the primary trying to otherize people, which really sort of dog whistled, or in this case, screamed, to a nativist, white nationalist kind of community. Ted Cruz isn't American because he was Cuban American. Marco Rubio might not be a citizen. Ben Carson's Seventh-day Adventist religion is weird and kooky, and mine's really normal. This was sort of his thing that he had been doing through the primary, and I'm not sure why it came up, but that's, yes, I remember saying that.
So S.E. said that in her usual brilliant way, and then Jeffrey Lord then seizes on the word otherizing and proceeds to try to accuse S.E. Cupp essentially of being a closet liberal because she used a word that had 3 syllables in it. And then, for some reason, to further make his point, he then says, and by the way, establishment Republicans, and I think, you know, parens like you, because now everybody's establishment, even S.E. So establishment Republicans, parens, you know, stage whisperer like you, think that fighting racism is giving a black guy a $5 tip. Now, I'm still trying to get my pizza, but
That woke you up a little bit?
then suddenly in my ear, the same producers that told me you don't have to say anything at all say, get in there, man, get in there, get in there. And so, literally with no prep at all, and this is different, usually on TV they tell you, look, next segment we're going to talk about the results from Texas, or we're going to talk about this or whatever. It's like your brain, you can't double click on the right icon, it can sort of download the right things you want to say. But I thought I was going to say anything. So I just have to turn to Jeffrey Lord and try to explain to him why he's just being ridiculous. And so it then turned into this sort of, celebrated moment on TV where we both just kind of, went for it. I love Jeffrey Lord, honestly. He's as dear a person as you would ever find. I don't think there's a single person at CNN that doesn't like him as a person. But I think he does a disservice to the country with this particular trick. Two tricks. One is, if you ever watch CNN, Jeffrey Lord is always trying to convince us that what's happening right now is absolutely normal, right? Reagan did this, though Reagan never did this. Back in 1837, there was a convention where this exact thing happened. So he's trying to convince us all that what's happening is normal. But then the other thing he's trying to do is he often wants to pretend that the Democratic Party has only always and forever been a party of racial sin, and the Republican Party has only always and forever been a party of racial purity. And the sort of reductionist, almost second grade, not me, you, your mama, not mine, like that whole thing, he just does it every time. And I think what it does, the great disservice that it does, is that both political parties have at times been racist parties. Both political parties at times have used explicit and sometimes implicit racial appeals to divide the country for their own purposes. And that history is tough enough and complex enough that it requires some actual honest dialogue. And my big fear is this whole alt-right thing that basically just says, that tries to kind of make white nationalism cool, is a dangerous development and a hard one to talk about if we can't be honest about the history of both parties.
S.E., as we sit here and listen to you both talk in a very reasonable, a very thoughtful manner towards each other, towards talking about the issues, it seems you're both very comfortable doing that. But that doesn't happen if you're running for office. It just doesn't seem to happen. How do we get to a point where this kind of dialogue can take place with the people who are actually making the decisions? Maybe it's happening behind the scenes, maybe, but I think what the American people feel like they see is something different.
Well, it takes two willing people, right? I mean, it's not enough to just have one who thinks of himself or herself as rational and open-minded. That's great. You need a receiver. And there are some. Van has worked not only with Newt Gingrich, but Rand Paul, and I know you're trying to work with Paul Ryan. Those are willing receivers. It's hard to identify those receivers, though, because as I said before, division is politically profitable right now. So the fact that Rand Paul and Van Jones can unite over prison reform, criminal justice reform, or Newt and Van, or Van and Paul Ryan on poverty, that's unique, because they are both uniquely, all of these people are uniquely open-minded. Open-mindedness is not often rewarded. Van was saying earlier, before this, that no one really talks about in the Democratic Party the fact that Paul Ryan has really reversed his course on poverty and outlined a pretty nice anti-poverty plan and is talking differently about poverty. And what kind of credit does he get?
Zero.
For that?
In fact, he gets attacked because now rather than progressives saying, holy crap, the Speaker of the House, the third most powerful person, like second in line to the presidency, cares about poor people? Well, holy crap, that's a complete game changer. Mm-hmm. Stop the presses, quit fighting about nonsense. You mean we can help people in Appalachia and in Detroit? And no, it's like, what's he doing? Mm-hmm. What's he up to? Mm-hmm. What's his cynical agenda? Helping poor people. Like, what if he's actually going to help poor people. Like, what? Imagine that. No. Like, what if we lose some votes to the Republicans? So that's the kind of stuff that, is in the way. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, it's exactly right. And I remember, Donald Trump goes to a inner city, right?
Sorry, go ahead.
But speaks to white people about black people, okay? And obviously he is sort of criticized for this. But I remember when Mitt Romney went into West Philadelphia to an inner city, predominantly black charter school, while he was campaigning, the mayor of that city, who we both know, who is black, came out and said, "What's he doing here? How did he suddenly find West Philadelphia?" Well, if you don't get credit for going, and then you get attacked for going and talking about it, but going and not really doing it, you're set up to fail. And Republicans do this too, believe me. But that's the culture that Van likes to talk about problem solvers, right? And I feel like I'm a problem solver. That's where I want to be. And sometimes most of the time I think conservative solutions are right, but I just want to solve a problem. Problem solving is not as rewarded as
it should be. But
Yeah.
but part of the thing is, listen, as you're trying to find your way as students and figure this stuff out, tolerance is not the answer. I don't want you to, if you're a conservative, to tolerate the liberals. And if you're a liberal, I don't want you to tolerate the conservatives. I need conservatives. I need you. That's different. I need you. Not only can I not get the votes, I can't get the right answer by myself. Okay? Conservatives actually ask really good and important questions. They ask, how much does this cost and who's going to pay for it?
my favorite questions. Yeah.
That's a good question. That's a really good question. Conservatives ask, is this really the business of the government in the first place? I mean, couldn't maybe you do that, right? That's a good question. Democrats, progressives, we also ask very good questions. We ask questions like, who's going to be left out? What about the people who are going to be left out? We ask, can you have a great country only doing things that corporations can make money off of? What about the things that the market can't deliver on? What about that? Those are great questions. Conservatives ask questions that are basically about liberty. They want limited government. They want individual rights. They raise those questions. We ask questions about justice. We don't want strong groups run over weak groups, big groups run over small groups. Liberty and justice for all. See how that works? We need each other. We have to have each other. Now, when it's time to vote, I want as much power as I can get for the justice side. When it's time for S.E. to vote, she wants as much liberty as much power as she can get for the liberty side. But at the end of the day, my view is I'm not smart enough, and liberals have too many blind spots and prejudices to answer these questions on our own. And I feel the same way about the conservatives. Newt, who's also on the show with us, loves to punch Democrats over Chicago. He says, how can you guys be out there protesting police brutality and stuff when there's hundreds of people being killed, black on black in Chicago, thousands, whatever the number is. It's a horrible number. And I said to Newt, I saw him last week, I said, here's my problem with it. You're talking about Chicago. You're not listening to the people in Chicago. If you talk about people that you don't talk to, you always come up with the wrong answer. Guaranteed. So I said, after the election, let's go to Chicago together. You bring a bunch of conservatives, I'll bring a bunch of Democrats, let's go to Chicago and listen. Because most Democrats just hear you using this as a political weapon against Democrats. They don't hear you as somebody who cares. They don't see you as somebody going to the funerals. They don't see you holding the hands of the moms. They don't see you at the vigils. where the kids are putting teddy bears and crying. They don't see you there. They see you on TV. They hear you on TV making political punches. But I'm going to say to you, I'm going to take yes for an answer that you care about Chicago. I'm going to say, yes, you care about Chicago. Thank God somebody cares about Chicago. Let's go together. Now, if you guys take that view, rather than, hey, how dare you say something bad about my president's hometown, who does that help? How does the problem get solved? So I'm just saying my hope is that you guys will model a better way of doing this.
I want to get a couple more video questions in before we're done. This comes from Dave Lagore. He's a professor for dramatic media here at TLU.
The language and policies of trigger warnings and safe spaces have become prevalent at many college campuses across the U.S., leading to a debate about the function and the frictions of such policy. Famously, at the University of Chicago, they recently sent a letter to all incoming first-year students stating, and I quote, "Our commitment to academic freedom means that we do not support so-called trigger warnings. We do not cancel invited speakers because their topics might prove controversial, and we do not condone the creation of intellectual safe spaces, where individuals can retreat from ideas and perspectives at odds with their own." Given all of this, how should universities balance the tensions of providing a supportive learning environment for all students with the need to protect academic freedom and freedom of speech as we explore complex and often divisive subject matter?
S.E.
So my take on this topic, and I've covered this a lot, college should prepare you for life, and life doesn't come with trigger warnings and safe spaces. There is no way to protect against being offended. Life is offensive. Ask Van. I'm offended every 5 minutes by something. And you know what? The world keeps turning. And we don't sort of sit together and think, okay, how can we strategize so that I'm not offended by this thing ever again? And I'm not mocking or dismissing tough conversations, heated rhetoric, and sort of controversial topics that come up and people feel sensitively about. I get that. I have those myself. But colleges are doing you no service by setting up this false fantasy land where you can go and escape the offense of daily life, a speech that you disagree with, ideas that are offensive to you. That's not preparing you at all. College and academia should be radically protective of free speech and should be a model of how that all works, instead of modeling something that ends the second you leave college. I think the better way to prepare you for life is to hear as many different ideas from as many different kinds of people as possible. Learn that there are other ideas and other viewpoints and other opinions, some of which you're not going to like. Have that experience. College is the perfect place to have that. It is not to compartmentalize speech and corral speech and really create this false sense of security that you can live in this utopian world where you can escape being offended. You can't. So better you know that now.
Yeah, I tend to be on S.E.'s side about this, and I understand the pull in the other direction. If you are first-generation Latina on an all-white campus where when you do try to add your idea to the overall mix, you just may feel surrounded and outnumbered. If you're an African-American student from an inner-city background and you land on a fancy campus where both from a racial point of view, from a class point of view, from a culture point of view, you just feel surrounded and outnumbered, and often highly antagonized to the point where you feel like, I'm not quite sure that I fit in here well enough on a social level to even engage academically, I can understand why you might want to reach for administrative power to protect you, kind of give you a beachhead, to try to, land at Normandy and move forward. The problem is it's not the right use of that power. First of all, my fundamental goal for you is that you not be safe. I don't want you to be safe, and I don't want you to seek safety. I don't want you to be safe. I want you to be strong. See, that's different. If you have a jungle and there's, snakes and there's brambles and there's thorns and there's thicket, you could try to get the administration to pave that whole thing over, or you could get some real good boots on you. I want you to have boots guy, because I don't want you to ever get in the habit that you can reach for some other authority and get it to pave stuff for you. There's going to be some day where you got to figure out how to get through that jungle on your own. That may sound old-fashioned, but I don't make any apologies for it. My view about you is that your ancestors went through worse than you're going through. I don't like to coddle students of color because I know what your parents and your grandparents went through. And when I used to come home from my fancy college education and complain to my father about all the horrific horrors that were going on the campus in the 1990s, my dad would say to me, "They put any dogs on you? They put any fire hoses on you? Well, go on and get your lesson, boy. I don't hear all that." And he wasn't downplaying the fact that these were real struggles in my life, but he also had a confidence that I could fight my way through. And so this is tough. It's not, I get it. But to the extent that people want to pull off to the side on their own, have their own clubs, have their own pity parties, that's one thing. But to the extent that you want the government to step in, or the campus administration to step in, or other people to step in and essentially fight your battles for you, I don't think that's the right prep. I want this to be a boot camp, because we need people to come off these campuses strong, not with the expectation that life is going to be safe.
We're just about out of time. I wanted to sort of offer a parting shot to both S.E. and to Van tonight. The takeaway, either from tonight, from this election, what do you hope the folks take away tonight?
This has been a tough year. I mean, Van and I are not just paid political operatives. We're activists. We're invested. This has been personal for us. I mean, one of the presidential nominees has personally attacked me on Twitter. That affects you. I would hope that over the course of watching this dumpster fire, that, as Van said, you don't walk away thinking, oh, this is normal. It's not normal on either level, on either side. It's really not normal. And like I said before, our generation needs your generation so desperately, and we know it, that for you guys to turn your backs on politics would be understandable. It would be forgivable, but it would be truly lamentable. And whatever way you need to get yourself into a position of public service will undoubtedly, just by showing up, help us solve some problems and help us move in a direction of progress, because you bring with that such a knowledge base. I mean, you guys are entrepreneurial. You guys are capitalists. How could you not be when Mark Zuckerberg is a billionaire hundreds of times over at whatever, 25? I mean, that's a good thing. But the other aspect is you attach a social cause to everything you do. And that's good. We've gotten a little cynical. So I want all of that goodness, that bouillabaisse of good stuff that you've got going that is so uniquely your generation. We need that. We need it desperately. So whether it's politics or public service or philanthropy or a business, I hope your generation does not throw politics and service and government out completely and leave us in charge. Because we've broken it. And we need y'all to help us fix it. So I hope that we have not completely turned you off.
Grant Jones.
Yeah. I think a couple things. One is because the campuses are supposed to be freewheeling and open with freedom of speech, et cetera, and because I think that the administration and the faculty have to defend people's right to say all kind of stuff. In other words, because there can't be and shouldn't be on the campuses an appeal to authority to silence speech, no matter how offensive, it puts an extra burden on you as students to resurrect something that is dear to me and rarely spoken of, which is just civility. If you have too little civility, then you need authority. If a fight breaks out in here, you got to bring in the cops. If you don't want the cops, let's figure out a way for us to actually listen to each other. It's great to be on a college campus where you can say whatever you want, but it's also great to be on a college campus where you can learn to listen more deeply. That would be my challenge to the students who are frustrated with the PC stuff. A lot of stuff that gets called PC, half of it is just civility. Just don't be a crude cad. Act as if someone else matters to you. Some of it is extreme and gets on my nerves, but that's not all of it. Some of it is saying, hey, listen, if you have a dinner party and somebody comes to the dinner party and we're all here together, can we figure out some way to include everybody in the conversation? That's not oppression. That's called civility. That's called being a decent human being. So trying to make space for each other and trying to listen to each other, assuming that you have blind spots, is really important. Listen, if you are a human being, you have some blind spots and you have some sore spots. That just means you're a human. If you're female, if you're African American, if you're a straight heterosexual dude, everybody has certain blind spots and certain sore spots. And learning about each other's blind spots and sore spots is called getting educated. And so I trust young people to sort this stuff out, but frankly, I trust now against evidence, because a lot of the stuff that I see on social media and all this sort of stuff, a lot of it, you can see why people want to go and grab authority to deal with it. And I'm saying don't do that, but also hold each other accountable without appeal to authority, to create an environment where everybody can listen and learn. But let that be a self-regulating thing within your generation. Don't appeal to authority to get it done for you. And the other thing I'll simply say is this. Your generation actually has I'm both jealous of you guys and I'm kind of pissed because you guys have a lot more power than my generation had at your age, and you don't seem to notice, and you complain a lot. And so, just for perspective, young people completely changed the conversation around immigration with this whole idea of the dreamers. That was an amazing invention. Before it was just like a bunch of undocumented people or illegal people. And suddenly they're dreamers. young people who have dreams and want to be a part. That took a lot of courage on the part of people who are not that much older than you are to step out and say, I don't have papers, but I want to be here. This is the only country I know. That changed the conversation. Most people on the left and the right agree, well, okay, maybe with those guys we think about it differently. Young people did that. Black Lives Matter. There's a bunch of young people. You may not like everything that they say, but I hope that they're raising issues that we can address better going forward because of young people. You just walk through all these things that young people are doing. Like Sheikha talks about the technology, the apps, all this stuff. You guys are killing it. And you can do much, much more. But to lose, in my party, you didn't get Bernie Sanders and you're just going to sit down and cry? It doesn't make any sense. You're going to have many, many elections. And you're going to win some, you're going to lose some. That's democracy. But S.E. is 100% right. The country will never be any better than you are. It will never be any more engaged than you are. It will never be any smarter than you are. You are the floor and the ceiling for us, and we need you. So, thank you.
There is a book signing that'll take place in Jackson Auditorium lobby immediately following this. Again, S.E. Cupp, Van Jones, thank you again.
Thank you, guys.
For more information, please visit tlu.edu.